Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, welcome to the third edition of the Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Address, a high-level lecture on peace, which we so sorely need in our world today, held every year as part of Geneva Peace Week. It is organized by the Kofi Annan Foundation, the Geneva Graduate Institute, and the Geneva Peace Building Platform. This year is the 10th anniversary of Geneva Peace Week. And this year is the 5th anniversary of Kofi Annan's death. 5 years ago, on the 18th of August, 2018, Kofi Annan passed away, and the world lost an extraordinary leader and an icon of peace and diplomacy. His vision, his compassion, his wisdom are sorely missed in the world today. As crises multiply from bloody conflicts to military coups, rising hunger, and natural disasters, we are in dire need of courageous, imaginative, and ethical leadership, the kind he showed on so many occasions. Kofi Annan used to say, and I quote, "We have the means, we have the capacity to deal with our problems, if only we could find the political will." This is precisely the mandate of the Kofi Annan Foundation. His legacy lives on through the foundation he established when he stepped down from the United Nations in 2007 to serve as a catalyst for political will, lasting peace, and inclusive governance. There are many copies of the Kofi Annan Foundation's annual report in the hall, by the way. Please help yourselves to copies of the report after the lecture and find out how the extraordinary initiatives of the Foundation impact communities worldwide, empowering young leaders, which is something Kofi Annan championed, empowering the young, promoting peace and democracy, and advocating for international cooperation. I am happy at this juncture to salute the family, Kofi Annan's family, Nan, Kojo, and Ama, who are watching this event online. Welcome to the Ivan Pictet Auditorium, which is nearly full to capacity, this wonderful state-of-the-art hall. And to welcome Nina, who is here with us today. Thank you for joining us. I would now like to invite you to watch a short clip, 3 minutes and a half, about the late Secretary General Kofi Annan.
For me, it all started in Ghana, where I was born. Ghana's independence coincided with my youth. And so I grew up with the political discussions, the struggle for independence all around me. And independence was achieved. And as a young teenager, this has an impression on you. You grow up believing that change is possible.
Kofi Annan described himself as a stubborn optimist. The world came to know him as a soft-spoken giant, an iron-willed fighter.
Peace must be sought above all because it is the condition for every member of the human family to live a life of dignity and security.
He stood up for the silenced. He challenged the most powerful to protect the most vulnerable.
Each of us must share the pain of all who suffer and the joy of all who hope.
Is there a problem I can help you with?
I want to sing the alphabet, Mr. Annan.
But he always sings it. I want to sing it.
Wait a minute. You have no problem.
No.
No?
Why don't we solve this problem the United Nations way? Together!
Together?
Together.
He was a diplomat, listener, storyteller, and icon.
And I firmly believe that when leaders fail to lead, the people can lead and make them follow. One is never too young to lead and never too old to learn.
A statesman, Nobel Prize winner, Secretary General, proud son of Africa. He was ageless, cool, and funny. He inspired millions around the world and led us forward.
I don't doubt the difficulty of the task or underestimate the barriers to success. But I'm more than ever confident about our capacity to change our world for the better.
Now it's up to us to carry on his legacy.
I remain convinced that the only answer to this divided world must be a truly united nations.
It's one of his great quotes, you're never too young to lead and you're never too old to learn. I would now like to invite the director of the Graduate Institute, Marie-Laure Salles, to say a few words.
Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire, Madame la Conseillère d'État, Madame la Directrice générale de la Direction du développement et de la coopération, Madame l'ambassadrice de bonne volonté auprès du Haut-Commissariat des Nations Unies pour les réfugiés, Madame la Directrice exécutive de la Fondation Kofi Annan, chère Corinne, Monsieur le représentant permanent de la Suisse auprès des Nations Unies, cher Jürg, Vos Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, Mesdames et Messieurs, en vos titres et fonctions, chères étudiantes, chers étudiants, chers et chers collègues, chers et chers amis, mesdames et messieurs, c'est à la fois un plaisir, un honneur, une grande émotion de vous souhaiter la bienvenue à l'Institut, à la Maison de la Paix, pour cette 3e édition de la Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Address. Comme il a été dit à l'instant, c'est une conférence qui rend hommage à un très grand homme, un de nos plus grands alumni, qui, je pense, est toujours et restera toujours un exemple pour l'ensemble de notre communauté. Bien sûr, pas simplement nos étudiants aussi, mais pour l'ensemble de notre communauté. Et cette 3e édition de la Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Address clôture un très beau moment, cette semaine que nous venons de vivre tous ensemble, une riche et dense 10e édition de la Geneva Peace Week. In the distant chaos that seems to engulf our world, amidst the suffering and despair that spread at fast pace in all regions of the world and become increasingly entrenched, with apparently no solutions in sight, peace seems to become a chimera, or at best a utopia. However, the engagement I've seen this year during the Geneva Peace Week, the dense energy and the dense emotion you could see and feel in these rooms is a powerful source of hope. The hope that an important share of humanity continues to believe that peace still is and should remain the lighthouse that guides us, that peace is still a utopia, yes, but a realist one, at least if we stand together, as Kofi Annan reminded us in this video. On August 8, 1945, at the end of a dreadful world conflict and 2 days after humanity witnessed in awe the ushering in of the atomic age, Albert Camus wrote those words that so strongly resonate today. Devant les perspectives terrifiantes qui s'ouvrent à l'humanité, nous apercevons encore mieux que la paix est le seul combat qui va être mené. Ce n'est plus une prière, mais un ordre qui doit monter des peuples vers les gouvernements, l'ordre de choisir définitivement entre l'enfer et la raison. On October 31st, Filippo Grandi addressed members of the UN Security Council in exactly the same terms, putting the leaders of this world in front of their radical responsibility. And I quote him, "Will you continue to allow this jigsaw of war to be completed by aggressive acts, by your disunity, or by sheer neglect? Or will you take the courageous and necessary steps back from the abyss?" The humanitarian sector at large is on the front line of this abyss. It sees every day on the ground the defeat of humanity, and it knows that its own action is endangered. Its own soldiers of peace are threatened. The last frontier before utter chaos. So the tone is strong, and so it should be. We are indeed in dire straits. Peace is a project, an eternal one, and a project that calls for courage and integrity. Peace has to be established, but we know that it must also be constantly re-established, sustained, and fought for on a daily basis. Let us never give up on our desire for peace. Let us never give up on our struggle for peace. Let us never give up on our commitment to peace, as Secretary General Antonio Guterres reminded us in his new agenda for peace. Let us not forget that without peace, there is no humanity. As Kofi Annan made clear, and I repeat here the words that we heard on the video, peace must be sought above all because it is the condition for every member of the human family to live a life of dignity and security. The struggle for peace is multidimensional. We need geopolitical peace across nations and communities. We should also fight for social peace, peace within our communities, peace within our organizations, within groupings of all kinds. And we see today that this might be, in fact, as complex as fighting for geopolitical peace. We should not forget also the important fight for planetary peace. We have to make peace with our biotope, with our planet, and its many but fragile resources which condition the survival of our species. Last but not least, let us not forget internal, individual peace. In times of existential angst, like the ones we're living, this is also becoming elusive and highly important. There's no better place to affirm the need for an urgent and constant fight for and commitment to multidimensional peace than right here, right now, at the Geneva Graduate Institute in the Maison de la Paix, in Geneva, and on the occasion of the Kofi Annan Geneva Peace address during the Geneva Peace Week. Since we are today here in the aula of the Geneva Graduate Institute in the Amphitheatre Pictet, let us not forget that an important dimension of humanity's commitment to peace should deploy itself through education. Education for peace is essential. Let me finish by thanking our partners for this event and for our great collaboration, the Kofi Annan Foundation and the Geneva Peace Building Platform. Let me also thank the Republic and the State of Geneva and the City of Geneva for their precious support. We have the chance today of receiving and listening to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi. And Filippo, we are really very aware that having you with us in the current context is a privilege. Thank you very much for being here. I would also like to thank warmly Ms. Barbara Hendricks for having accepted to join us today for a special performance. Ms. Hendricks, your engagement for human rights, for refugees and peace is exceptional, and it is really an honor to welcome you this morning. I now leave the floor to Nathalie Fontanet, State Counselor in charge of the Department of Finance, Human Resources and External Affairs at the Republic and State of Geneva, and wish you a wonderful end of morning.
As the formal greetings have already been given, allow me to greet you, ladies and gentlemen, briefly in your titles and functions. Thank you for joining us today for the third edition of the Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Address. The State of Geneva, as well as the City of Geneva, are proud to support it. This year's address marks the 5th anniversary of Kofi Annan's passing. It also marks the 10th anniversary of the Geneva Peace Week, another milestone that reminds us of the significance of this event and the importance of our shared commitment to dialogue and peace. Geneva, traditionally known as the City of Peace, has always played a role as a sanctuary where people can find refuge. As a neutral hub for multilateralism, home to diplomatic summits, peace negotiations, and discreet mediations efforts, it stands as a symbol of hope and unity. In a world where international tensions are on the rise and solutions to conflicts remain elusive, we find ourselves at a critical juncture. Nationalist agendas threaten international cooperation, and the need for mutual understanding has never been greater. Today, we come together to shed light on peace and provide a platform for those who work tirelessly to build it, day after day. Geneva, with its rich history of diplomacy and humanitarian action, is the perfect backdrop for this important conversation. It is within the walls of this city that the modern humanitarian movement took root, and that the first global international organization in charge of peace was established. The International Committee of the Red Cross and the League of Nations led the way. They were later joined by countless organizations. Since then, Geneva has become a beacon of solidarity, international cooperation, and the rule of law. It is indeed through these principles that we can create a world where peace and justice prevail. However, the challenges we face are immense, but so is our potential to overcome them. We must not succumb to fear or division. Instead, let us find strength and unity in unity and collaboration. More than ever before in human history, we share a common destiny. We can master it only if we face it together. Today, we have again an opportunity to embrace the spirit of Geneva, unite our voices, amplify the message of peace, and build bridges of understanding across borders. By doing so, we honor the legacy of Kofi Annan, and we reaffirm our commitment to a world where every individual can live a life of dignity and security. In closing, let us remember that peace is not a destination. It is a journey that requires constant attention and dedication. Let us continue to build upon the foundation laid by Kofi Annan and work towards a world where peace is not just a dream, but a reality for every member of human family. Thank you for your attention, and may this Geneva Peace address serves as a catalyst for change, a call to action, and a source of inspiration for all of us. Thank you.
I thank Madame Fontanet, State Councillor in charge of the Department of Finance, Human Resources and External Affairs, Republic and State of Geneva. And indeed, peace is not a destination, it is a journey. We all have to work hard at it. High Commissioner for Refugees, Ambassadors, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I see so many familiar faces here, and I'm very tempted to say hello to each and every one of you, but permit me to mention one in particular, Zaid Raad al-Hussein, former High Commissioner for Human Rights. Thank you for joining us, sir. Our next contributor to this Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Address is one of the world's most admired and beloved sopranos, and an ardent human rights activist as well. She has lived in Europe since 1976 and holds dual Swiss and Swedish nationalities. She has strong links to the United Nations and to our former Secretary General, Kofi Annan. This great lady has been a longtime supporter of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. In fact, she was named UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador in 1987, nearly 40 years ago. And in recognition of her outstanding commitment, she was named Honorary Lifetime Goodwill Ambassador in 2002, the only UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador to hold this title. She is the founding president of Sweden for UNHCR, National Partner Fundraising Foundation. And she told me a story once about the Nobel Peace Prize. In 2001, despite a sprained ankle and an awful cold, she flew to Oslo to perform at the Nobel Prize ceremony at the invitation of none other than the Nobel Prize laureate himself, Kofi Annan. She recalls that because of her cold, she and Kofi had not been able to speak before the ceremony, but she believes there must have been a spiritual connection, telepathy, because the first lines of the Secretary General's acceptance speech, and it's a speech I highly recommend, one of his best, the first lines were about a baby girl born in Afghanistan. Something like, "Today in Afghanistan, a baby girl will be born." And just before his speech, Barbara Hendricks had sung the beautiful Negro spiritual, "Sometimes I feel like a motherless child." Barbara Hendricks is very active with the European Women's Lobby in support of women's human rights and equality between men and women in European institutions. Her numerous awards include Chevalier de la Légion d'honneur, Commandeur de l'Ordre des Arts et des Lettres, the Prince of Asturias Award, and Mrs. Hendricks is a member of the Swedish Academy of Music. In 1991 and 93, Barbara Hendricks sang in war-torn former Yugoslav cities of Dubrovnik and Sarajevo. And her close friend, the late Sergio Vieira de Mello, invited her to sing in East Timor at its Independence Day ceremony in 2002. There's so much more to say, but let me conclude by saying Barbara was born and grew up in the deep south of America during the civil rights movement that was inspired by Rosa Parks and led by Martin Luther King. Her connection to her roots in this movement is the foundation of her own commitment to defending and promoting human rights in every moment of every day. And I have a message from this great lady to you, ladies and gentlemen. Please, do not use your phones during her performance, and do not take any pictures or videos, please. I thank you. And I quote her saying, "We want you all in the room with us." Today she will perform her medley for refugee children, accompanied by her husband, Ulf Englund, on the slide guitar. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Barbara Hendricks.
Thank you very much. During the many years that I have been working for the refugee cause, I continue to be inspired by my colleagues who are devoted and courageous, who are in the field whenever they are needed. I'm also inspired by the refugees themselves, and especially the women. It is their courage and their dignity that supports me when I feel the most discouraged. But it is the light in the eyes of the children when they laugh and play that give me hope for the future. Our medley for refugee children is composed of Summertime, of George Gershwin, Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child, and portions of the poem Home by the Somalian-British poet Varsan Shire. Fish are jumping and the cotton is high. Your daddy's rich and your mama's good looking. So hush, little baby, don't you cry. One of these mornings you're gonna rise up singing. Then you'll spread your wings and take the sky. But till that morning, there's nothing can harm you with Daddy and Mommy standing by. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. No one leaves home unless home chases you. Fire under your feet, hot blood in your belly. It's something that you never thought of doing until the blade burned threats into your neck. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one chooses refugee camps or strip searches that leave your whole body aching. No one chooses prison because prison is safer than a city on fire. And one prison guard in the night is better than a truckload of men that look just like your father. How do the words, the dirty looks, roll off your back? Perhaps because their blow is softer than a limb torn off. The insults easier to swallow than rubble, than bone, than your child body in pieces. I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun. And no one would leave home unless they were chased to its shore, unless home told you, quicken your legs, leave everything behind. Crawl through the desert, wade through the oceans, drown, be saved, go hungry, beg. Forget your pride. Your survival is more important. No one leaves home until home becomes a sweaty voice in your ear saying, leave. Run away from me now. I don't know what I've become, but I do know that anywhere is safer than here.
And now it's time for the 2023 Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Address. The Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Lecture. As you know, our keynote speaker today is Filippo Grandi, the 11th United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, who was first elected to the position by the United Nations General Assembly on the 1st of January 2016 for a 5-year term. They have since re-elected him twice to continue to serve. And he will now complete his term in office, sadly, on the 31st of December 2025. So we have two years plus. And although he will be sorely missed in this position, I am certain that he will go on to greater things, always in the service of humanity. Challenges of forced displacement and statelessness have grown immensely in scope, in scale, and in complexity, as we all know, and displacement numbers have reached unprecedented levels, as Mr. Grandi has told us, and the Security Council, and whoever will listen time and time again, and he will tell us today. Unprecedented levels. During Mr. Grandi's tenure, UNHCR has striven to better protect, empower, and seek inclusion and solutions for displaced people and stateless people, and to enable a better response to emergencies. This includes strengthened efforts in the framework of the Global Compact on Refugees to broaden partnerships, mainstream development engagement in UNHCR's responses, and mitigate the effects of climate change, crisis on displacement. Filippo Grandi has been engaged in refugee and humanitarian work for more than 30 years. From 2010 to 2014, he served as Commissioner General of UNRWA, the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, having previously been its Deputy Commissioner since 2005. He also served as Deputy Special Representative of the UN Secretary General in Afghanistan, and worked with UNHCR and various NGOs in various places in the field, in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and of course, UNHCR headquarters in Geneva. And if you follow Filippo Grandi on social media, you will find that he has a dizzying travel schedule. He was in New York the day before yesterday. And he's going to New York on Monday. For wherever in the world there is a refugee-related crisis or fundraising opportunity, there you will find Filippo Grandi. He's always in the right place at the right time, wherever his compassion and skills are needed most, being on the ground with the most affected people, sometimes in the most remote locations. I have had the great pleasure of observing and knowing Filippo Grandi throughout my career at the United Nations. However, it was an immense privilege for me to have worked closely with him at UNHCR too briefly, in 2017 in Geneva, the Middle East and Africa, and to have witnessed firsthand his commitment and deep dedication to the humanitarian cause at hand, the alleviation of the suffering of refugees and displaced persons, and to have felt up close his innate compassion and his leadership skills. To deliver the third Kofi Annan Geneva Peace Lecture, focusing on the impact of the absence of peace on refugees, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the 11th United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi.
There was a time in the lives of many of us in which we thought that we had entered an era of peace. Not perfect peace, not global peace, but peace that could progressively extend to further parts of the world. A time after the Berlin Wall was finally reduced to rubble, when cooperation would gradually but surely substitute the fractures of the Cold War. This is why when Pope Francis a few years ago warned that we were close to, I quote, a third world war in pieces, I dismissed the thought as exaggerated. But Pope Francis might have spoken with sad foresight, as he often does, when he coined that expression. Because, dear friends, as we look in anguish at the destruction of Gaza, after having watched Ukrainian neighborhoods devastated by Russian rockets, peaceful Sudanese cities savaged by armed men, communities in Ethiopia torn apart by violence, Afghanistan drifting from years of civil strife into an apparent tranquility in which women's rights are denied. When we look at this litany of crises, one after the other, we can only conclude the same. We live again in a time of war. Thank you, Ahmed, for your introduction, and to the Kofi Annan Foundation for inviting me here to speak. Many thanks to Marie-Laure and the Graduate Institute for hosting us. It's always a pleasure to cross the street. Thanks to Nathalie Fontanet for conveying, as always, Geneva's commitment to peace, and to Patricia and Jörg and the Swiss government for your steadfast support of UNHCR and humanitarian work. And thank you, dear Barbara, for your and Ulf's moving performance. You really made me cry. And also for your incredible solidarity for refugees and UNHCR, as we heard, spanning decades. It is an honor to be here in the name and in the spirit of Kofi Annan, our Secretary General, during the formative years of so many of us in the United Nations and beyond, and someone who generously remained available to a multitude of friends and colleagues afterwards as a trusted and valued mentor and advisor. It is hard to believe that it has been 5 years since he left us. And it is truly topical to speak in the spirit of such a man of peace at a time of war. A time in which, with increasing impunity, men pick up arms to kill, rape, destroy, and above all seize power. A time of great global divisions, perhaps the most severe that we have seen in our living memory. No matter where we look and which issue is discussed, we see, we feel those divides, from global geopolitics to local communities. We're almost driven to polarization, as if it had become impossible to consider different perspectives. Be with us, otherwise you're not good, not loyal, and not deserving of respect and rights. The big rifts, north-south, east-west, rich-poor, strong-weak, have been made even more visible by the unequal and inequitable response to the COVID-19 pandemic, by the responses to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and now putting us at risk of a fracture that could be irreparable by the war in Gaza. My organization, UNHCR, as you know, does not have a mandate to operate in the occupied Palestinian territory. But as a humanitarian, and having served with UNRWA for 9 years, and as somebody very concerned about the potential spread of the conflict, I'm compelled to speak about this terrible situation. I share wholeheartedly the views of Secretary General Antonio Guterres as he expressed them most clearly at the Security Council on the 24th of October. Hamas attacks against Israeli civilians must be condemned and hostages released, and the Israeli military operation that is killing Palestinian civilians, destroying civilian infrastructure, and denying access to basic assistance is simply wrong. This escalation, by the way, is also counterproductive, and it will take us even further from the real and just peace which alone can guarantee safety and security to Israelis and Palestinians. So although the images of this terrible war fill us with anguish and pain, we must do everything in our power to try and turn this devastating crisis into an opportunity to renew the discourse of peace in the Middle East. Because, as I told the Security Council on Tuesday, let us not fool ourselves. A solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has not been elusive in the past few years. It has been consciously, willfully, repeatedly neglected as something almost irrelevant that other broader initiatives would make unnecessary. It was increasingly felt that efforts to bring real peace, no doubt difficult, even excruciating, could be substituted by temporary ceasefires responding to chronic flare-ups of violence, that life would return every time to normal, although there's nothing normal in either occupying or being occupied, especially for 56 years, until the next eruption of violence in an endless cycle. That was a colossal miscalculation, as we painfully observe now. And let me go beyond Gaza and the Middle East, because procrastinating peace and perpetuating unresolved conflicts, which do not disturb the powerful, but have a disastrous impact on millions, is becoming the prevailing pattern in many places around the world. This is why UNHCR, in its latest statistics published just last week, reported 114 million refugees and displaced people, up from 110 million in the previous report, up from 89 million, and so forth. There were fewer than 40 million when Kofi Annan was Secretary General. And this awful number is destined to grow because new crises add themselves to the existing one. UNHCR declared 46 emergencies in 32 countries in the past 12 months. And the existing ones suffer from the syndrome of procrastinated peace and continuing conflict. I won't bore you with a long description of the many crises which we, the humanitarians, are grappling with every day. You can find this list in any of our reports. But just a few examples. Sudanese refugees in Chad tell us stories of rape, mutilation, and murder in Darfur that 20 years ago caused outrage in the world, and today are barely a ripple in the 24-hour news cycle. The abuse of women and children in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo happens every day in a situation so desperate that survival sex has become a coping strategy for thousands displaced by this mother of all unresolved conflicts. Displacement is growing in Sahel as a result of armed groups growing stronger amidst political instability. or in Myanmar, where previous fragile attempts at internal peace have collapsed after the military coup. The despair and destitution caused by the combined effects of conflict, climate, and poverty have become global and are pushing a growing number of people on risky routes, as we heard from Barbara's poem. Among those moving across one of the most dangerous places on earth, the Darien Gap in Central America, where I'll be next week, are men and women from African and Asian countries. Dear friends, in this world of wars, it has become easier to speak of retribution and score settling, like the members of the Security Council far too often do, instead of the peace and security they are supposed to pursue and maintain. This is why this Geneva Peace Week is so necessary and timely. And this is why the work of the Kofi Annan Foundation remains so critical. Kofi Annan, of course, as many of you know better than me, was the embodiment of this notion that peace must be pursued, as we heard, even when it appears impossible to do so. In this, he was the ultimate United Nations official. And let me tell you how proud I felt watching that video. He was a fierce multilateralist, a proud African and an international leader, and a committed peacemaker. Many of us have learned the lessons which leaders like him and other international role models of his generation have left to us through their life work and crucial legacy in these difficult times. I benefited myself from their guidance and example. So today, let's be inspired by them. Kofi Annan would be, like so many of us, dismayed by the state of the world. But he most certainly would not wallow in despair. He knew that we always had to contribute in our own way, dealing with very difficult situations with eyes wide open, never naive to the realities of the moment or dismissive of the history or the context. Recognizing that progress is not simple and it takes patience, commitment, and hard work. Because, as he said, and I quote, peace is never a perfect achievement. And because, as he concluded in the preface of his autobiography, and I quote again, I wish for a world in which men and women can stand up to the forces of injustice and inequality wherever they exist. In other words, to intervene. So today, as food for thought, let me offer some simple thoughts from my own perspective, which is not that of a political actor, but of a humanitarian, on the pursuit of peace and how we can all intervene. First, let's make sure, please, that we keep humanitarian action strong. This is an issue that worries me a lot these days. There are so many crises, and peacemaking is failing so badly that humanitarian presence and operations are more necessary today than ever. Humanitarians are out there and are saving lives, but we are being asked to do more with fewer resources. Political support and, crucially, much more funding are necessary to help and stabilize people, to give them at least some hope. If not, there will be even more suffering, death, displacement, and anger. Hardly the environment in which peace can take root. Second, as I said, we humanitarians are there with the people, but we are often alone, especially in the very fragile situations in which we increasingly operate. For example, under the control of the de facto authorities, unrecognized regimes, or governments under international sanctions. These are situations in which diplomats, development officials, and business people leave. But humanitarians must stay to save lives, if nothing else. This is where we should enjoy a great deal of flexibility instead of being compelled to work with one hand behind our back, as is the case in many such places. Flexibility, first and foremost, from those controlling the territory, but also flexibility and trust on the part of others, including donors, giving us more space on how and with whom we engage to carry out our work. Third, we must finally address more decisively and systematically one area which is crucial to pursue peace, which is to invest more efforts and resources in creating resilience among affected populations at the onset of a crisis. You may have heard some of us refer to emergency development, but we could equally speak of the need for emergency peace building. I recently visited eastern Chad, the poorest part of a poor country, which has been receiving, again, hundreds of thousands of Sudanese refugees from Darfur. We visited host communities sharing their meager resources with those fleeing. Clearly, humanitarian assistance is neither sufficient nor adapted to ensure sustainable support to those in need. This is why I was grateful to be there with the World Bank, which, amidst this acute crisis, was able to pledge substantial resources to bolster the resilience of everybody, to build schools, reinforce health structures, create access to sustainable energy, address chronic food insecurity. I call this peace building because the absence of these investments would mean an environment of such fragility that the risk of conflict spreading from nearby Sudan would be even higher. Resilience is a bulwark of peace. And it can only occur if there is a shift in the way development works. This is why the reforms of the global financial architecture promoted, among others, by the Secretary General are so important. This is why reversing the climate emergency, or at minimum ensuring that the vulnerable have the tools and resources needed to mitigate or adapt to the circumstances, are also crucial peace-building measures, since climate change is a driver of conflict. Dear friends, there is a fourth and last point that I must raise. Our world, this world at war, desperately needs a reboot of the very principles of law and humanity to counter the trends in action that we're seeing today. And here I would propose that we look at this in two distinct but related layers. The first is a hardware issue, the respect for the law. This is especially important as we get ready to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Around the world, we see basic human rights being violated with impunity, and even the rolling back of gains achieved over the years through hard work and the sacrifice of many. Countering such trends, including pursuing justice as an instrument of peace, is fundamental and will help reset the social contract that is fraying at the edges within so many societies. And talking of war, it is especially international humanitarian law that is increasingly being violated without any consequence for the violators, but with the gravest of consequences for the civilians. As militaries become more powerful and technology makes it easier to fight, including from behind keyboards on the other side of the world, we see militaries and militants attacking civilians and civilian infrastructure with increasing boldness. This is unacceptable. While technology has changed, the conduct of hostilities and the respect for international humanitarian law must not. If it is more difficult to defeat your enemy on the battlefield, that is all the more reason to engage in negotiation instead of punishing civilians. Otherwise, civilian attacks will only be met by more civilian attacks. As he said, an eye for an eye that will leave us all blind. This is a call to political leaders, policymakers, and men with guns. But there is also a second layer, a software dimension that each of us, irrespective of position or power, must reflect upon. And here, for sure, I hear Kofi Annan's voice. It is a voice of respect for others, even or especially those with whom we do not agree. It is a voice of care, of compassion, of positive contributions, in language and in deeds. In a world where we see so much division, even within societies, within families, a world with so much hate speech, including in its abhorrent forms of anti-Semitism or Islamophobia, or against refugees and migrants. In a planet that is being so relentlessly attacked by man, in this troubled world, respect, care, compassion, and solidarity with humankind are so necessary. For it is upon those foundations, those values, and the ways with which we as individuals carry ourselves that peace, real peace, even an imperfect peace, can be built. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? We both have microphones. Thank you, High Commissioner, for a very moving, comprehensive, and heartfelt lecture, address. Kofi Annan would have been proud and would have agreed with everything you said. In a way, I don't feel he's really left us, because it reminds me of a line from a poem, and forgive me, Corinne. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sun on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. I could go on, but we're running short of time, so let us open immediately. I will not use my prerogative as moderator to ask the first question. I might ask the last question. But the floor is open to questions. I would ask you please to speak loudly and clearly and identify yourself and your affiliation before asking the High Commissioner a question. We have about, what, Corinne, 15 minutes? Yeah, give or take? All right, so short, no double-barreled questions. Thank you very much. Who will be the first? The lady in the back with her hand up. Microphone, please. Thank you so much.
Hello, colleagues. My name is Svetlana Gladkih. I am from Ukraine, and I am UNHCR staff member. Hello, Mr. High Commissioner. It is nice to speak to you again. I would like to ask one simple question. Since recently, humanitarian organizations have been heavily criticized for lack of action. On the other hand, as you mentioned, UNHCR even doesn't have a mandate to work, for example, in Palestine crisis. And name me any humanitarian organization that actually stopped war. So my question is, isn't that a time to transfer responsibility and accountability for peace building to specific countries who are in a position to act and could make a difference? Thank you.
Would you like to take that, High Commissioner?
Yeah, very briefly.
Yes.
Thank you for the question, if I understood
correctly.
Maybe two quick things. One is just to clarify, because sometimes it is misinterpreted, this issue of mandates. Of course, United Nations agency have mandates. We are not an NGO. We have specific mandates within which we must operate. The fact that UNHCR does not have a mandate, as I said, in Palestine is because UNRWA is there, dealing with Palestinian refugees and exercising with others the bulk of the humanitarian mandate of the United Nations. So just to clarify, it's not that nobody's there, but we respect that division of labor that in fact is codified in the Refugee Convention of all documents. On the other important point, shouldn't the accountability be given to countries? Well, by the way, countries do have, theoretically, an accountability vested in institutions like the Security Council or the General Assembly. The problem being that accountability, those responsibilities, let's call it like this, in situations of conflict in particular, but not only, can only be carried out if there is unity. If there is, the system is designed to bring states together to fulfill those responsibilities. So when unity recedes, and this has been the strong appeal of the Secretary General, of myself and many others, when this unity recedes, it's very difficult for those responsibilities to be carried out effectively, but you're spot on in a way.
As you told the Security Council on Tuesday, we need your voice, not your voices. We need one united voice coming out of the Security Council. The gentleman over there with his hand up, please. Yeah. And then we'll come to you, madam.
Thank you. I'm Fedi Dao, Director of Globe Ethics. Thanks for this moving closing ceremony of the Geneva Peace Week. So my question is, in the lens of Kofi Annan legacy, can you say more about why you think the war in Gaza could be an irreparable divide in our world?
I can reply quite, unfortunately, quite quickly and briefly, because I think that it will dig those divisions deeper and make it more difficult to agree on everything. We see it, we have seen it already as a result of the Ukraine war, that those divisions transcend the boundary of the discussion on a specific issue, like the Ukraine war or the Gaza war, and affect everything, including discussions that are vital for the survival of humanity, like climate action, for example. And when those divisions infect other discussions, we become unable to address the big challenges that threaten humanity. And this is why, at every new crisis, this becomes worse. And may I say also, having, like many of us, lived in the Middle East for a long time, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is also, carries also feelings, responses, reactions that run deep in the conscience of the world. And therefore, divisions there risk becoming even more grave than divisions on other issues.
Thank you, High Commissioner. The lady in the sixth row there with the, is it pink, your suit? Hand up, please, so the microphone can come to you. Beige, okay.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Lovely to see you again, High Commissioner. I'm Mary Hofstetter. I'm an alumni from the Geneva Graduate Institute, and I'm always pleased to come here again. I have a practical question. I mean, the world seems to recognize industrial countries are growing old, they need labor, and whereas the refugees who come in are so desperate for work. Where is a real problem with them getting work visas to come and being recognized that they are actually an aid to industrialized countries?
In fact, you're touching on what I always think is the fundamental problem, besides, of course, as is my duty to remind the world that refugees, whether they can work or not, whether they are old or young, or male or female, or children or adult, have rights that need to be respected. But leave that aside, which is my daily job, what you say is very important. There is a demographic imbalance in the world, or, situation in the world whereby industrialized countries and many other countries need more people to work, but that is an issue in the realm of migration. And I often say that if migration was to be much better regulated with well-organized visa regimes, work permits, systems to allow applicants for work in countries where there is not such need, but going to the countries where the need is there, if that was better regulated, it would solve a lot of what so many states call irregular migration, which has become their obsession, and within which, unfortunately, they subsume the refugee movements as well, if you see what I mean. And I think that, unfortunately, that well-regulated migration, which some countries try to do, some countries have partially done, countries like Canada do it quite well, other countries as well, but not everybody. It can only function if countries work together. We're back to the same issue. The Chancellor Scholz told me that Germany, and I don't reveal any secret because it's public, needs 400,000 migrants, new workforce from outside every year to maintain its economy on track. He said, if I regulated that in this manner, then everybody would want to come to Germany. Therefore, it has to be a European decision, determine how many people are needed to work in Europe every year from abroad, regulate that, and that would sort of share this responsibility among countries, avoiding that one country becomes the magnet for everybody else. And last point on this, which is a very important topic, a well-regulated migration offering legal pathways to more migrants would also reduce the pressure on asylum, because in many places asylum is the only way for people to get into a country, whether they are genuine refugees or not. And that's what has caused an overload of asylum system, which is now part of, you hear some governments say, the asylum system has failed, the 1951 convention must be thrown in the garbage. You hear that a lot. That's really the wrong target. If you took things from another angle and regulated them well, you would lighten the pressure of a system that is still very valid, that needs improvement, but is still very valid. So it would have that benefit as well.
If only that could be regulated. This 400,000 skilled migrants are needed in one country.
In one country, yeah.
In a perfect world, that would be ideal. However, it's not a perfect world. I saw a hand up in the 8th row, the lady on the aisle. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if, this is open. I'm Iman Ben Mohammed. I'm a researcher and former MP from Tunisia. I have just a small question, actually. The war in Gaza seems to be very, very long. And the UN Security Council, as you said, he have not one voice, so we will not have a vote in the UN Security Council. So how how can you explain actually this incapability of the UN to manage actually the situation in Gaza, and how can the world do for the situation now? It's really a genocide, and you know that better than me, actually. But I'm really I'm just asking what after, actually, you know, the UN resolution in the UN General Assembly, and what after that, because it seemed really, really, really long and without no exit from that. So how you can explain what the UN can do? This is my question.
Well, I do, as you have heard, I share your frustration, in fact, and you know, everybody has his or her own responsibilities in this. I do believe that if there was to be a Security Council resolution, a good one, that would be useful, more probably than General Assembly resolution, which is very broad, but the Security Council resolution would carry at least some authority to try and address the situation. Diplomats in the Security Council are trying to get to a resolution, as far as I can tell, having been there on Tuesday and having spoken to some of them. I think that what we can do, all of us in different ways, is to try to influence that debate. You know, we all have ways to do that. I do it through my advocacy, and others have other channels to put pressure. By the way, I want to say two quick things. One is that you're right to say, because the Security Council is a body of the United Nations, so the United Nations are failing. They're failing as a collective of states in this duty of making peace. The United Nations as an institution, as an organization of which my office is part, is trying to do its best in other ways, bringing relief, humanitarian relief, wherever it's possible. So, you know, there are different actions that can be done by different parts of the system. But I want to say something else. I mean, there's many students here. This is something I often tell students when, unfortunately, they have to listen to me rather grim speeches on terrible things happening. So the question is always, but what can we do? Which is actually a sacrosanct question, a very important one. And I say, maybe not everybody can do it in his or her country, but those who can, vote well. I'm not here to do propaganda for any party. Let me be very, very clear. This is not my role. I would be making a grave mistake. But what I say is that if you do care for international issues, for peace, for climate, for equality, for health, global health, vote politicians that in their program say they will deal with these matters, and then hold them accountable if they are elected. This is an important way to influence public debate.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's a gentleman here on the fifth row. Please, microphone. The ambassador of Afghanistan, I believe. Could you put your hand up, Mr. Ambassador? I'm so sorry to ask you to do this again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, High Commissioner, and thanks to the Kofi Annan Foundation for putting this. I think that little girl child that Kofi Annan was talking in 2001 might either be a refugee right now or abandoned in Afghanistan and searching for work. But we had 20 years that many things has changed in Afghanistan. My question, High Commissioner, follows what you said about this multiplicity of crises, which enables now certain states to float international law one after the other. And the example I want to give you is 1.6 million Afghan refugees, which are going to be pushed from Pakistan to Afghanistan. And I think it's maybe it's a huge crisis, but it evades our attention because we are facing really daily crisis and disaster in Gaza, but also in Ukraine and other places. So I wanted to hear, from you about this kind of situations, because you know already what's happening in Afghanistan. And these kind of attempts to float international law, but on the other hand, it makes it difficult for you, as you said, that these are places where you have regimes or de factos, which themselves are not responsible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nasajan. I just want to, maybe if you allow me, just for everybody to know what you're talking about, maybe not everybody knows. Pakistan, of course, is a country that has hosted Afghan refugees quite generously for now more than 40 years. And, but recently there was a decision by the main security body of Pakistan that those Afghans living in Pakistan that are not registered under one of the, let's say, refugee categories, to simplify, have to go back to their country. And this is, of course, worrying. Whether they're refugees or not at this point is, in our opinion, less relevant. We have actually shared an advisory with all countries after August 21 that no Afghan should be sent back to Afghanistan in a situation that is so fragile. So we have invoked that advice with the Pakistani government, and we've been working since the 3rd of October when this decision was made to at least mitigate the consequences of the decision if and when it will be implemented. The deadline has passed. It was 2 days ago. We have seen some deportations, not many. We have seen many people deciding to go by themselves because they are worried about what might happen. So it's a very fraught situation, but even this morning I was dealing with it, discussing with the Pakistani government how we can protect at least the most vulnerable categories among those. And we have, although they're not registered, we have actually registered many ourselves. So at least those could be protected. I think it's an open discussion and it's ongoing. We'll do what we can. Pakistan is a sovereign state and they can implement the decisions. There's also a lot of politics, international politics, domestic politics, like always behind this. Can I just add one quick point? I know it's getting late, but to use the ambassador's point to show how, refugee protection, and indeed, like any other activity that has some relationship with peace, because refugee protection has a relationship with peace. We can make big statements, and we should, in support of those values, those principles. But in the end, when it comes to the realities, it boils down to a lot of negotiations. And this is what we're doing with Pakistan at the moment. I am often asked, what in practice means refugee protection, which is the core of the work of my organization? I always say it's negotiations, negotiating access, non-refoulement, rights of refugees. I say this because we're here to celebrate a man who was the master of negotiations. And I personally learned so much from him in very difficult situations. I remember during the Balkan Wars, his advice was always, he was always strong, Kofi Annan, as we all know, in stating the principle, but he was always convinced, and he knew very well that in order for those principles to be respected, you had to negotiate. And negotiation is a skill that one has to learn.
Thank you so much, Filippo Grandi, High Commissioner for Refugees. You bring back many memories because he was a gentleman, but he had a determination of steel, and he knew the value of listening to all sides when you were in a negotiation. But I have instructions now from those in control to end this discussion. But it remains for me to thank you for, I'm sure everyone will agree, thank you for your powerful words, your inspiring words, and your leadership in times of crisis in this world of war. We wish you well, and we wish you success. You should be the president of the world to bring peace to the world.
Thank you for your understanding. We would like to take a few moments still with you and with your attention. It's the closing of the Geneva Peace Week, and we have the honor, of course, to have the Kofi Annan lecture, and it was great and very moving, so thank you very much for that. But we also have the honor to have Ambassador Patrice Adanzi, who will say a few words to close this 10-year anniversary. We will have also a verre de l'amitié, a welcome drink, but I would also like to have a few moments to thank everyone for this ceremony. So first, Patricia, and then me for a few seconds.
Thank you very much, and apologies also from my side. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers amis. We don't have an easy job. We have to be flexible, and talking after Filippo is always a thing to avoid. I know that. And I try to do my best to be between this closing session and the verre d'amitié that was promised. So you're giving me a second difficult task. You're asking me to close a peace week in a moment where we should actually talk about peace all over throughout the year, every day. So that is one of the things that I want to tell you. Let us not close that week. Let's reboost our commitment to peace, and let's not take peace lightly. Maybe we did that in this part of the world. Take it lightly and take it for granted for too long. We shouldn't. Nowhere and never. And also another message from myself to you is building peace is a tough job. It's hard work, and it's a vulnerable plant. And once it's lost, it's like pesticide over a field of sunflowers. It looks ugly, it's messy, and the soil remains polluted for a very, very long time. I would like to commend the organizers for that week and for bringing all the reflections together, and also to give us hope. It's possible if we work together, if we stick together, and if we bring this word of peace and this meaning of it further, that we can actually do something. I don't know about you, but people ask me sometimes, you have a difficult job. It's always difficult, it's always violent, it's always conflict. How do you deal with it? I was born during a civil war, but here in Switzerland. My grandfather was killed, but I was safe. Maybe I was lucky, maybe I'm privileged, but I'm fine. I can have a job, I'm paid, my children attend school. If I have an issue, I can go to the police and file a complaint, and probably the culprits will be held accountable for what they have done. So I am privileged, and so are you. We are all privileged. So what can we do with this? What we can do with this privilege is actually to use it wisely, and also to defend peace and the instruments, the legal instruments that guard it. As you know, Switzerland is, of course, famous for its peace. Geneva is the peace city. And Switzerland has a tradition of debating and sharing of power, and we get it quite well together at the end of the day. It's not the experience that we currently have at the Security Council. As you know, for the first time, Switzerland is holding a seat at the Security Council for 2 years. We're into 10 months of this tenure. And our campaigning slogan was, Switzerland, a plus for peace. And one of our priorities in the Security Council is the protection of civilians. We would have never, ever imagined how difficult it is to bring these two, only these two things, to be heard, to be understood, and actually to be talked about it freely. At times, it feels as if the permafrost of frozen conflicts was melting under our very feet every day. Switzerland is also the depository state of the Geneva Conventions. You all know that. They remain so relevant. We should dust them off and put them center stage in today's world. We also know that international humanitarian law is a very good compass to bring light in darkness when we have the situation that we're in currently. We should never lose that compass. So how can we do, every one of us, this small piece in the respective positions that we are? That is the question that you have to ask yourself. I'm asking this question to myself every day, I can assure you that. My ministry also invites you and others next year to the 3rd International Cooperation Forum to Basel, Geneva. We were 2 years in Geneva, now we go to Basel to talk about peace and also what we can do to do it. Our international cooperation programs have a lot of dimensions of peace and prevention of violence, but we of course were not successfully everywhere, obviously. What do we do better? What can we do better? We have to bring probably in more communities, carefully listen, go deeper into root causes, and bring in and out what knits communities to one another. Often it's women that bring this sense, not always and not exclusively, but often. And rather than focus on what divides us, what actually reunites us. And we must build on common wins as well. So thank you for being here. Be guided by the right compass and plant the right seeds, the seeds of peace. Thank you very much and enjoy the verre d'amitié.
So thank you very much, Ambassador. And so I promise now it's the last 3 minutes that you'll have to endure, but we cannot end this 10th edition of the Geneva Peace Week without proper thanks to everyone who have worked very hardly for this edition. It has been an intense and amazing week. We have had more than 3,000 persons registered to participate to this Geneva Peace Week. We organized 64 events this year within 5 days. And beyond the high attendance, the quality of the discussions was really up to our expectations. The organization of the Geneva Peace Week is a collective effort, so if you allow me, I would really like to take a few minutes now to thank our partners that contributed to the success of this incredible edition. First of all, a big thank you to our core donor, the Swiss Department of Foreign Affairs, that has been supporting the Geneva Peace Week since its creation 10 years ago. A special thank to new donors that joined this beautiful adventure on the occasion of the 10th year anniversary of the Geneva Peace Week. We have the Service Industriel de Genève and a private Swiss foundation. Without their support, none of this will simply be possible. Thank you to the Canton, Ville de Genève, and the Swiss Mission for their continuous support as well. This year, we also collaborated with different local and Geneva-based institutions. Thank you to the Manotel Group, Deutz, Domaine des Loliers, Nespresso, Les Épis, and la Fondation Egvert. A thank you also to our dear consortium, with whom the GPP collaborates ahead of the Geneva Peace Week to shape each edition of the Geneva Peace Week. So thank you to the Geneva Center for Security Policy, GCSP, DCAF, the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance, Interpeace, CUNO, the CCDP, the Center on Conflict Development and Peace Building here at the Geneva Graduate Institute, Principles for Peace, the Geneva Graduate Institute, the UN in Geneva, and the Swiss Mission in Geneva. We have also to thank with our heart Geneva Peace Building Platform and Geneva Peace Week staff that supported us during this week. We have Kim, Nora, Eve-Marie, and Zelda, who were all here to hand in the mics to all our workshops and panels. Thank you to the events team of the Geneva Graduate Institute, Sabrina, Arnaud, Alexis, Pascal, that are working here behind the scenes up there. A big thank you to Alain, really, a big, big thank you to him, who has been our focal point among the team. You are really the best. We also want to thank the Geneva Center for Security Policy, the GCSP, for providing additional space to organize a number of events. A special thank you to Zoe, who had among her assignments to support our team for the organization of the Geneva Peace Week. Thank you. Thank you to all organizers that have dedicated their time and resources in submitting proposals and organizing these events during the week. It has been a pleasure collaborating with you. A big thank you to all speakers that came to the Geneva Peace Week and shared with us their views and expertise. And last but not least, I would like to thank my team, and they are here. I know they don't want to come on stage, but please do come. Please. So I would like to thank Tatiana Avante for her extraordinary work on communication, Gabriela Boozer, our fundraising and hospitality coordinator who made us all feel welcomed and special, Annika Eriksson-Persson, our community management lead, for taking care of our vibrant community, peace-building community present here in Geneva, Maria Baltag, our admin coordinator who made sure we were aflow for the admin details, Olivier Chamard, who is our photographer, showing the best sides of all our speakers. And last but not least, Danny Diogo, Geneva Peace Week lead, who did such an amazing job for this 10th year edition, and who took Geneva. You really took Geneva Peace Week to an entire new level. So thank you very much for this. And we thank you all immensely for your enthusiasm, dedication, hard work. Thank you all for participating to the Geneva Peace Week. I hope this edition was up to your expectations. We are already looking forward to seeing you next year.